My name is Margaret Wilson. I raised my son Daniel alone, working 2 jobs for 25 years to give him everything. His wedding day should have been my proudest moment, but it became my greatest humiliation. What he did at that altar broke my heart in ways I never imagined. Before I tell you what happened, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Now let me share how love, betrayal, and an unexpected letter changed everything. My hands still remember the weight of wet laundry at 3 in the morning. 25 years of wringing out other people's stains, and somehow my own life never came clean. The fluorescent lights at Murphy's laundromat hummed their lonely song while I folded sheets that smelled of fabric softener and broken promises. By 6, I'd be across town, pushing a vacuum through silent office corridors, erasing the day's footprints before the executives arrived. This was my symphony. 2 jobs, 7 days a week, no intermission. Daniel was 3 when his father walked out. I remember standing in our cramped kitchen, holding the note he'd left on the counter. Crisp, efficient, like a resignation letter. I can't do this anymore. 6 words to end a marriage, to abandon a son, to rewrite our lives into something smaller. I could have crumbled, God knows. The weight was heavy enough. Instead, I learned to carry it. Every double shift was a brick in the foundation I was building for Daniel. Every skipped meal meant he could have seconds. Every birthday cake I baked at midnight after my shift. Every parent-teacher conference I attended with bleach still stinging my nostrils. These were my love letters, written in sacrifice. The other mothers at his school wore pearls and practiced smiles. I wore exhaustion and calloused hands. They discussed vacation homes. I calculated whether I could afford the field trip fee. But Daniel never went without. Never. I watched him grow from that confused 3-year-old into something I barely dared to dream. A man with possibilities. He studied while I worked. He earned scholarships while I scrubbed toilets. And when he walked across that stage in his cap and gown, engineering degree in hand, I sat in the back row of the auditorium and let myself cry. Not from sadness, from victory. Mom, I did it, he'd said afterward. His arms around me, diploma pressed between us like proof of a miracle. No, baby, I'd whispered into his shoulder. We did it. The years softened after that. Daniel landed a job at a prestigious firm. His apartment was small but his, paid for with his own paychecks, his own merit. He called me every morning before work, every evening before bed. My phone became a lifeline, humming with his voice, telling me about projects and presentations, asking my advice like I was wise instead of just worn down. There's someone I want you to meet, he said one Sunday over coffee in my kitchen. The same Formica table where he'd done homework while I paid bills, where we'd celebrated and mourned and survived. His eyes had that light, the one you can't fake, can't manufacture. Love. Her name is Emily, he continued, and his whole face transformed. She's different. Mom, she's smart and kind and she makes me want to be better. I reached across the table and took his hand. Then I can't wait to meet her. 3 weeks later, he brought her by. Emily Carter arrived in my modest living room like a spring breeze. Soft cardigan, genuine smile, eyes that crinkled when she laughed at my stories. She called me Mama Margaret before the evening was over, helped me with dishes despite my protests, and left a pot of white orchids on my doorstep the next day with a note. Thank you for raising such an incredible man. I stared at those orchids for a long time, something dangerous blooming in my chest. Hope. I'm going to ask her to marry me, Daniel told me 6 months later, his voice trembling with excitement. I found the ring, Mom. I can't believe this is happening. Neither could I. I'd spent 25 years building a life from scraps, teaching my son that worth isn't measured in bank accounts or zip codes, that dignity lives in honest work and love given freely, that we might not have much, but we had each other, and that was everything. Watching him prepare to start his own family, I finally felt it, that quiet satisfaction, that all the sleepless nights, all the aching joints and empty refrigerators had led somewhere beautiful. I had no idea I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to learn how far I could fall. The restaurant Daniel chose had cloth napkins that felt like silk against my rough palms. I'd worn my Sunday best, a navy dress I'd found at Goodwill, pressed until the creases could cut glass, My shoes pinched, but they were closed, toe and respectable, in the ladies' room mirror before we went in. I'd practiced my smile, tried to see what they would see. A woman of 56 with lines earned from decades of hard labor, hands that no amount of lotion could soften, and eyes that still held a mother's fierce pride. It would have to be enough. Emily was already there when we arrived, and relief flooded through me. She stood to hug me, warm and genuine, her perfume light and expensive. "Mama Margaret, I'm so glad you could make it." That should have been my first warning, the way she glanced toward the door as she said it. The slight tension in her shoulders, but I was too grateful, too eager to belong to notice. "My parents are joining us," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I hope that's okay. They wanted to meet Daniel's family. Family. Singular. Just me." They arrived like winter sweeping into spring. Susan Carter entered first, her presence commanding immediate attention. She wore elegance like armor, a cream suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, pearls that caught the light with each measured step. Her husband Richard followed, silver-haired and silent, the kind of man who let his wallet do his talking. "You must be Margaret," Susan said, extending a hand that felt cool and smooth, untouched by work or worry. Her eyes traveled over me, a quick assessment, cataloging and dismissing in the same breath. "How lovely to finally meet you." The word finally carried weight I couldn't quite name. We settled into our seats, the Carters on one side, Daniel and Emily on the other, and me at the head of the table, somehow feeling like the outsider at my own son's celebration. A waiter materialized with menus thick as textbooks, prices discreetly absent, the kind of place where if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. "The duck here is exceptional," Richard offered his first words, "and the wine list is quite extensive." I ordered chicken. Safe, simple, the least expensive thing I could identify without my reading glasses, which I'd left home because they made me look old. Susan turned to me with a smile that belonged in a portrait. "So tell me, Margaret, what is it that you do?" The table went quiet. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to retreat. "I work in sanitation," I said, the words I'd rehearsed. It sounded better than cleaning toilets. "And laundry services." Oh, one syllable, but it contained volumes. Susan's smile never wavered. "How interesting. The important thing is to be useful, isn't it? Useful like a mop, like a tool you stored in a closet when company came." Emily's hand found Daniel's under the table. I saw her squeeze, saw something pass between them, an apology maybe, or a warning. "Mom's the hardest worker I know," Daniel said, his voice carrying an edge. "She put me through school working 2 jobs. "How admirable," Susan said, and somehow made it sound like pity. "It must have been quite difficult for you both. But look how well it turned out." She gestured to Daniel like he was a prize she was awarding me, proof that my suffering had been worth something. The dinner stretched on like pulling teeth. Susan dominated the conversation, discussing their recent trip to Marsa's vineyard, the charity gala they were planning. Emily's cousin who just made partner at his law firm. Their world was a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. "We should do this again," Susan said as we left, the lie hanging in the air like perfume. She kissed Emily's cheek, shook Daniel's hand, and gave me a smile that never touched her eyes. "It was so enlightening to meet you, Margaret." In the parking lot, Daniel walked me to my car, a 15-year-old sedan that looked like shame next to the Carter's Mercedes. "They're just particular about some things," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Give them time." But time, I was learning, wasn't the issue. Driving home through Boston's gleaming streets, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same face, same woman, but something had shifted. For the first time in 25 years of sacrifice, I felt small. The orchids Emily had given me were wilting on my kitchen counter when I got home. I should have thrown them away. The first morning Daniel didn't call. I told myself he'd overslept. The second morning, I told myself he was busy with wedding preparations by the end of the week. When my morning coffee grew cold, waiting for a phone that never rang, I stopped making excuses and started counting the silence. Our daily calls had been my anchor for years, his voice the first and last sound that bookended my days. Now my phone sat dark and accusing on the kitchen counter. A thing that used to promise connection and now only emphasized its absence. I tried texting. How are the wedding plans coming along? 3 hours later. Good. 1 word, 4 letters, a door closing. Would love to help with anything you need. I wrote the next day, my thumbs clumsy on the small screen. Emily's mom has it covered. Of course she did. I started seeing them in fragments. In social media posts I probably wasn't meant to find. Emily at a bridal shop, surrounded by women in designer dresses, all of them holding champagne flutes and laughing. Daniel at a golf course with Richard Carter, both of them in matching polos, looking like an advertisement for country club life. There were engagement parties I wasn't invited to, planning meetings I didn't know about, a whole wedding taking shape in a world where I didn't exist. When I finally managed to catch Daniel on the phone, calling at lunch because he never answered in the evenings anymore, his voice sounded strained, distant, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. We should get together soon, I said, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. Maybe I could take you and Emily to dinner, my treat. I don't know. Mom, things are crazy right now. I understand, baby, but I'd really love to. I have to go. Meeting in 5. The dial tone hummed like a flat line. Emily's transformation was more subtle, but somehow worse. She stopped by once, ostensibly to show me the wedding invitations. Thick cardstock with embossed lettering. The kind of elegant excess that announced wealth in every serif, but the warmth was gone. She didn't call me Mama Margaret anymore. She perched on the edge of my worn couch like she was afraid of catching something, and her smile never quite landed. The invitations are beautiful, I said, running my finger over the raised text. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Carter request the honor of your presence. Daniel's name appeared second, smaller like an addendum. My mother has excellent taste, Emily said, and something in her voice made me look up. She was staring at her hands, twisting the engagement ring around her finger. For a moment I thought she might say something real, something true, but then she stood, collected her purse, and was gone within minutes, leaving behind only the faint trail of her perfume, and a growing unease in my chest. I bought my dress for the wedding at the same Goodwill where I'd found my navy one. This time I chose blue, a soft dove blue that reminded me of the sky on the day Daniel was born. It cost me $40, but I spent 3 months saving for alterations, making sure it fit perfectly, that the hem was even, that I would look like I belonged. I hung it on my closet door where I could see it every morning, a promise that I would be there, that I was part of this, no matter how much the silence said otherwise. But late at night, lying awake in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't just the distance, though that cut deep enough. It was the way Daniel's voice had changed, the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes during our brief encounters, the way Emily looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been guilt. I'd spent 25 years learning to read my son's silences, to hear what he couldn't say, and now, in the quiet of my empty apartment, with my blue dress hanging like a ghost in the doorway, I heard it clearly. I was losing him not to Emily. She was sweet beneath whatever was changing her. Not even to the Carters and their world of country clubs and summer homes. I was losing him to something worse, to shame, to the terrible arithmetic that said a mother who cleaned toilets wasn't worth claiming in rooms full of people who mattered. I told myself I was wrong. I told myself love was stronger than class, that the years we'd built together couldn't be dismantled by a few months of silence, but my blue dress hung in the darkness and somewhere across the city. My son was learning to pretend I didn't exist. The wedding was 3 weeks away. I woke before dawn on the day of Daniel's wedding, my heart already racing. The blue dress hung where it had for months, catching the first gray light through my window like a promise. I'd pressed it the night before, until every crease surrendered, steamed it until the fabric held the faint scent of lavender and hope. Today was the day. Today all the distance and silence would make sense, would reveal itself as nothing more than pre-wedding stress, and I would watch my son marry the woman he loved, and everything would be okay. I told myself this while showering with my good soap, the one I saved for special occasions. Told myself while applying makeup with shaking hands, covering the dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights. Told myself while fastening the small pearl earrings, fake but pretty, that Daniel had given me for Mother's Day 10 years ago. In the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked hopeful. She looked foolish. The church was 40 minutes across the city, a massive stone edifice in the heart of Beacon Hill that probably cost more to heat than I made in a year. I arrived early, wanting to savor the moment, to soak in the joy before the ceremony swept everyone away. The morning sun painted the stained glass windows in jewel tones, emerald, sapphire, ruby, and somewhere inside, an organ was playing Bach, the notes solemn and beautiful. White roses and gold ribbon adorned every pew. The air smelled like money and flowers, and the kind of happiness that comes from never having to worry about anything real. I stood in the vestibule, clutching my small purse, trying to find my breath. "Excuse me, are you family?" A woman in a headset appeared at my elbow, clipboard in hand, her smile professional and distant. "Yes," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I'm the groom's mother." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. She glanced down at her clipboard, then back at me. "Of course. Could you wait here one moment?" She disappeared through a side door, leaving me standing alone in the vestibule while other guests flowed past, women in designer dresses and men in tailored suits, all of them confident and comfortable, belonging in a way I never would. When the woman returned, she wasn't smiling anymore. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "there's been a change to the seating arrangements. If you could follow me." Relief flooded through me. A change. Maybe they'd upgraded my seat, moved me closer. Maybe. She led me down the side aisle, past the front rows where I saw the Carters already seated. Susan's hat a masterpiece of feathers and silk, past the second row and the third, past families and friends, past the photographer setting up his equipment, past the point where anyone in the wedding party would be able to see me, to the back, the very last row tucked against the wall where the acoustics died, and the view was obscured by a stone pillar. "Here you are," she said brightly, as if she'd done me a favor. I stared at the empty pew, my mind struggling to process what was happening. "I don't understand. I'm his mother. I should be in the front row." Her smile went tight. "I understand your confusion, but this is what was arranged. The Carters requested—" She caught herself. "There was a change in the family seating plan. The Carters requested." The words hit like a physical blow. "Where's Daniel?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "I need to speak with my son. The groom is preparing in the sacristy. I really can't disturb him right now, but I'm sure after the ceremony—" "I need to see him now." Something in my tone must have convinced her, because she sighed and gestured for me to follow. We wound through corridors that smelled of old wood and candle wax, past rooms full of groomsmen laughing and adjusting boutonnieres, until we reached a small door at the end of the hall. She knocked. "Mr. Wilson, your mother needs a word." The laughter inside died. There was a long pause. Then the door opened, and there was my son in his tuxedo, looking like a stranger. "Mom." He stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. "What are you doing back here?" "They moved my seat," the words tumbled out, desperate and confused. "To the back of the church. Daniel, I don't understand. I'm your mother. Why would they—" "It's complicated." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Then uncomplicate it, baby. Talk to me." He ran a hand through his hair, messing up whatever the stylist had done. In the distance, the organ music swelled, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. "I can't do this right now," he said. "There are people, expectations. Mom, please, just don't make this harder than it already is." "Make what harder?" "Being present at your wedding. Making a scene." The words came out harsh, and he immediately looked like he regretted them, but he didn't take them back. "Please, Mom, just take the seat they gave you. Don't cause problems. Not today." "Problems?" The word felt foreign in my mouth. "I'm a problem. That's not what I—" He glanced back at the door, where I could hear voices calling for him. "I have to go. Please, just do this for me." He was already turning away when I reached for his arm. "Daniel, look at me." He did, finally, and what I saw in his eyes broke something fundamental in my chest. Shame. My son was ashamed of me. "Baby, please." My voice cracked on the word. "Just tell me what's happening." Daniel's jaw worked like he was chewing on words too bitter to swallow. Behind him, the door to the sacristy opened. and one of his groomsmen stuck his head out, a college friend whose name I'd once known, who'd eaten at my table, who now looked at me like I was a stranger interrupting something important. "Danny, we need you for photos. Give me a minute," Daniel said, not turning around. The door closed. We stood in the narrow hallway, organ music filtering through the walls, and I watched my son choose what to say to me. I could see him doing it, selecting words, discarding them, searching for something that would make this easier for him. Not for me, for him. "The Carters," he began, then stopped, started again. "Emily's parents have been very generous. They paid for the wedding for—" I know what they paid for. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my sides. "I'm asking why I'm being treated like I don't belong at my own son's wedding." "You do belong." But he said it without conviction, like a line from a script he didn't believe. "It's just complicated. The families, the expectations. There are people here today who what? Who shouldn't have to look at the woman who scrubbed toilets so you could become an engineer." He flinched. Don't what? Don't remind you don't exist." "Mom, please." He glanced toward the sanctuary, where I could hear the string quartet beginning to play. Any moment now, the procession would start. "I know this isn't what you expected. I know it's not ideal, but today has to go perfectly. For Emily, for her family. They've invested so much in this, and I just need you to..." "To what?" I stepped closer, close enough to see the tiny beads of sweat on his forehead, the way his hands trembled as he adjusted his bow tie. "Say it, Danielle. What do you need me to do?" His eyes met mine, and for one terrible second, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who cried when I left for work, who held my hand crossing streets, who told me I was the best mom in the whole world. Then that little boy vanished, replaced by this stranger in a tuxedo who was about to break my heart. "I need you not to embarrass me," he whispered. The hallway tilted, or maybe I did. I reached for the wall to steady myself. "Embarrass you," I repeated, testing the words like they were in a language I'd never learned. "By existing, by being your mother. That's not... You're twisting this into something." He ran both hands through his hair now, destroying whatever the stylist had created. "Jesus, Mom, why are you making this so hard? It's one day, one ceremony. Just sit where they put you. Smile for the photos you're included in. And after this is over, after they go back to Martha's Vineyard and we can breathe again, we'll figure everything out. But right now, today, I need you to just what? Stay in your place." The words erupted from him, loud enough that I heard movement behind the sacristy door. He lowered his voice, but the damage was done. "Please, Mom, don't come up front. Don't approach us during photos. Don't. Just please, don't make a scene. Can you do that for me? Can you just let me have this one perfect day without..." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to, without me. The sacristy door opened again, and this time it was Emily's father, Richard Carter, in his immaculate gray suit. He took in the scene with a single glance, me, with tears starting to burn in my eyes, Daniel looking cornered and desperate, and his expression never changed. "Time to take your position," he said to Daniel, his tone brooking no argument. Then, to me, "Mrs. Wilson, the ceremony is beginning. You should take your seat. Not, 'We're glad you're here.' Not, 'Thank you for coming.' Just a dismissal, polite and absolute." Daniel looked at me one more time. I waited for him to say something, to take it back, to choose me the way I'd chosen him every single day for 25 years. "I'm sorry," he said, and then he turned and walked away with Richard Carter, leaving me standing in the hallway in my $40 dress with my fake pearls and my breaking heart. I found my way back to that last pew on autopilot. The ceremony had started. Emily's flower girls were scattering petals down the aisle. Guests were standing, and from my position against the wall, I could barely see anything. Just the backs of heads, the occasional glimpse of white dress, the sound of promises being made. I watched the Carters in the front row, Susan dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, Richard standing proud and straight. I watched Emily's extended family, her friends, all these people who belonged in this moment, and I realized I was witnessing my son's wedding the way a stranger would, from the outside, invisible. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride." And everyone applauded. I stood with them, clapped with them, smiled like my face wasn't frozen, in something that felt more like rigor mortis than joy. Daniel and Emily came back down the aisle, radiant and laughing. They passed within 5 feet of where I stood. Daniel's eyes skimmed over me, saw me, I know he saw me, and kept moving like I wasn't there, like I had never been there at all. I didn't go to the reception. I told myself it was because I wasn't hungry, because I was tired, because the humidity was making my dress stick to my skin. But the truth was simpler and more devastating. I couldn't watch Daniel cut a cake, give a speech, dance with his bride, and pretend I didn't exist for another 4 hours. So I went home. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning. The coffee cup in the sink, the lights still on in the bathroom, the bed unmade, because I'd been too excited to bother. But everything felt different now, like I was seeing it through water, distorted and strange. I hung my blue dress in the closet next to my work uniforms. It looked wrong there, that soft dove blue against the industrial grays and whites, hopeful against practical. I should have known better. The first week after the wedding, I waited for Daniel to call. He didn't. I texted on Tuesday, "Congratulations again, sweetheart. I hope you two are enjoying married life." No response. Thursday, "Would love to hear how the honeymoon was when you have time." 3 dots appeared. Stayed for a minute, then disappeared. No message came. Sunday, "Miss you." Nothing. My phone became a monument to silence. I found myself checking it obsessively, waking up at 3 a.m. to see if maybe he'd texted while I slept, refreshing my email between loads of laundry at work, keeping it on the break room table during lunch just in case. Just in case he remembered he had a mother, work became my only anchor, the one thing that hadn't changed. I showed up at Murphy's laundromat every morning at 3, fed quarters into the industrial machines, folded sheets with corners so crisp they could draw blood. Mrs. Murphy noticed my distraction, the way I kept staring at my phone instead of the work in front of me. "You okay, Margaret?" she asked one morning. Her kind face creased with concern. "Fine," I lied. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was hollow. I was going through the motions of a life that suddenly felt pointless. What was the purpose of all those years of sacrifice if they ended here? In this erasure, by 6 a.m., I'd moved to my second job at the office building downtown. The executive floors, where I vacuumed around desks worth more than my car, empty trash cans filled with half-eaten lunches from restaurants I'd never afford, scrub toilets for people who'd never acknowledged my existence. I used to take pride in this work, used to tell myself I was providing a service, keeping things clean and running smoothly, that all labor had dignity. Now I just felt like what Susan Carter had called me, useful, a tool, a function, easily replaced. The nights were worst. I'd come home exhausted, my joints aching, my hands raw from chemicals, and the silence would be waiting for me. I tried filling it with television, with radio, with music, but nothing worked. The quiet had teeth now, and it chewed on me in the dark. I started cooking for 2 out of habit, then staring at the extra portions cooling on the counter. Started setting my alarm for the times Daniel used to call, then lying there listening to it beep into emptiness, started writing texts I never sent. "Please talk to me. Did I do something wrong? I'm your mother." 3 weeks after the wedding, I broke. I baked Daniel's favorite cookies, chocolate chip with just a hint of sea salt. The recipe I'd perfected over years of birthday celebrations and bad days at school. I packaged them carefully in a plastic container, added some fresh fruit, and a small bouquet of daisies from the bodega on my corner. At 7 p.m., I drove to their new apartment, a place I'd only seen in the photos Daniel had sent back when he still sent photos. It was in a nice building, doorman and everything, the kind of place that had probably required the Carters' down payment. I didn't go up, didn't knock. I just left the basket by their door with a note. "Thinking of you both. Love, Mom." The next week, I brought another basket, cookies again, and some of the magazines Emily had mentioned liking, and a small house plant the week after that. Homemade soup in containers that didn't need to be returned. I never rang the doorbell, never tried to force my way into their life. I just left evidence that I still existed, still loved them, still hoped that whatever had broken between us might somehow heal. On the 6th week, I arrived to find my previous basket still sitting there, unopened. The daisies had died. The fruit had started to rot. They hadn't even brought it inside. I stood in that carpeted hallway with its soft lighting and expensive sconces, holding my latest offering of love, and something inside me finally cracked open. I wasn't invisible because they couldn't see me. I was invisible because they were choosing not to look. I left that basket anyway. Left them all, lined them up like shrines to a relationship that was already dead, and walked away. At home, I did something I hadn't done in 25 years of single motherhood, of double shifts, of sacrifice and struggle. I gave up, not on Daniel. I couldn't give up on Daniel any more than I could give up breathing, but on hope, on the belief that love was enough, that what we'd built together was stronger than class and shame and the Carters' influence. I let myself break, and in the breaking, I discovered that silence has layers, the silence of distance, the silence of anger, and underneath it all, the silence of a heart that's learning it might not be wanted anymore. My phone stayed dark, my apartment stayed quiet, and somewhere across the city, my son was living a life that didn't include me, until the day Emily knocked on my door. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer. I'd learned to expect nothing. No packages, no visitors, no interruptions to the routine of work and silence I'd built around myself like a shell. But the bell rang again, insistent, and some old instinct made me put down my coffee and check the peephole. Emily stood in the hallway and she looked terrible. I opened the door. "Emily, Mrs. Wilson." Her voice came out thin, stretched. "I'm sorry to come by unannounced. I know I should have called, but She stopped, pressing her lips together like she was physically holding words back. "Can I come in?" She looked nothing like the radiant bride from 8 weeks ago. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes that I recognized from my own mirror. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater, and she was wringing her hands like she was trying to squeeze something out of them. "Of course." I stepped back, suddenly conscious of my small apartment, the worn furniture, the stack of bills on the counter. But Emily didn't seem to notice. She walked in like she was carrying something heavy and desperately needed to set it down. "Can I get you some tea? Coffee?" "No, thank you." She sat on my couch, the same couch where she'd once perched so uncomfortably, but this time she collapsed into it like her strings had been cut. "I needed to talk to you. Daniel doesn't know I'm here. He can't know." I sat in the chair across from her, my heart starting to pound. "Is something wrong? Is he okay?" "Physically, yes." She looked up at me, and her eyes were bright with tears. "But Mrs. Wilson, Margaret, I need to tell you something, and it's going to hurt, and I'm so sorry, but you deserve to know the truth." The world narrowed to her face, her voice, the tears starting to spill down her cheeks. "The wedding," she began, her voice shaking. "What happened with your seat? With Daniel asking you to stay back? None of that was his idea." I'd known that, hadn't I? But hearing it said out loud felt different, like the difference between suspecting a wound and seeing the blood. "My parents," she continued, the words coming faster now, like she'd been holding them back too long. "They didn't want the wedding to happen." "Not at first, when Daniel proposed. When I told them, my mother said absolutely not. She said Daniel was from a different class, a different world, that it would be embarrassing for them, for me, for our family reputation." Her hands twisted in her lap. I told him I didn't care, that I loved him, that none of that mattered, and my mother said she had to stop, breathe, force the words out. She said if I insisted on marrying him, there were conditions. The wedding would happen only if Daniel agreed to create distance from you. The room went very still. "They called it managing expectations," Emily said, her voice bitter. "They said if the marriage was going to work, if Daniel was going to be accepted into our family, into our social circles, then certain adjustments needed to be made. They said having you visible at the wedding, in the photos, being introduced to their friends, it would raise questions they didn't want to answer. So they asked him to hide me." The words came out flat, and he agreed. He fought them. Emily reached forward like she wanted to take my hands, but stopped herself. "Margaret, you have to understand. They threatened everything. My mother said if he didn't agree, she'd cancel the wedding. She'd cut me off financially, socially. She'd make sure I was disowned, and my father backed her up. They said if Daniel really loved me, he'd do what was necessary to protect me. I could see it so clearly now. Daniel, caught between his bride and his mother, choosing the future over the past, choosing the woman he was building a life with over the woman who'd built a life for him. I couldn't even blame him, not really. The day of the wedding, Emily said, tears streaming freely now. When you came to see him backstage, I watched him get ready that morning, and he was a mess. He'd barely slept. He kept saying he couldn't do it, that he had to tell you the truth, that lying to you was killing him. But my mother was there, and she reminded him what was at stake, and he broke. I watched him break. She pulled something from her purse with shaking hands. An envelope, slightly crumpled, like it had been carried around for days. He wrote you this letter the night before the wedding. He couldn't sleep, so he wrote, but he was too afraid to give it to you. Too ashamed. She held it out to me. He doesn't know I took it, but you need to read it. You need to know that walking away from you was the hardest thing he's ever done, and it's destroying him. I took the envelope. My name was written on it in Daniel's handwriting, the letters uneven, like his hand had been shaking. After the wedding, Emily continued, I thought things would get better. I thought once we were married, once my parents went back to Martha's Vineyard, we could fix things. But Daniel can't forgive himself. He sees your baskets outside our door, and he can't bring himself to open them. He's so ashamed. Margaret, he's so full of guilt that he can't function. Some nights I find him just staring at his phone, writing texts to you that he never sends. She wiped at her face with the back of her hand. I didn't know what kind of family I was marrying into when I fell in love with him. I didn't know my parents would be so cruel. And I didn't know until it was too late that they'd make him choose. But I see now what they did, what we all did to you, and I can't live with it anymore. The envelope in my hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because you deserve the truth. Because I need you to know that your son loves you more than anything in this world, and the fact that he hurt you is eating him alive. She stood, smoothing down her sweater with trembling hands, and because I'm done letting my parents dictate my life, I've told Daniel we're going to fix this, whether he has the courage yet or not. But first, you needed to understand what really happened. She moved toward the door, then turned back. The baskets you leave, the cookies, the flowers, everything, he keeps them all. They're lined up on our kitchen counter like a timeline of everything he's lost. He just can't bear to tell you that yet. After she left, I sat with that envelope for an hour, afraid to open it, afraid of what words my son had been too broken to say to my face. Finally, as the afternoon light faded through my windows, I slid my finger under the seal and unfolded the pages inside, and I began to read. Mom, I've started this letter 20 times, crumpled up 19 versions and thrown them away because I couldn't find words big enough to hold what I need to say. But tomorrow I'm getting married, and tomorrow I'm going to hurt you. In a way I swore I never would, and I can't do it without at least trying to explain. I'm a coward. That's the truth of it. That's the beginning and end of everything. I had to stop reading. My hands were shaking so badly the pages rattled. I set the letter on my lap, pressed my palms flat against my thighs, and made myself breathe, in, out, in, out. Then I picked it up again. You taught me to be strong. You showed me what strength looked like every single day, in the way you worked those double shifts without complaining, in the way you showed up to every school event even when you were exhausted, in the way you loved me so fiercely that I never once doubted I was wanted. But somewhere along the way, I learned the wrong lesson. I learned how to survive, how to work hard, how to climb. I forgot to learn how to be brave. When Emily's parents said they wouldn't accept our marriage unless I agreed to their conditions, I should have walked away. I should have told them that any family who asked me to choose between my bride and my mother wasn't a family worth joining. I should have been the man you raised me to be. Instead, I calculated, I thought about Emily's trust fund, about the connections her father could provide, about the doors that would open for us in their world. I thought about the wedding they were paying for, the honeymoon, the down payment on an apartment I could never afford on my own. And I told myself I was being practical, strategic. I told myself it was temporary. That once we were married, once things settled, I could fix it. That you would understand, because you've always understood everything. But that was another lie. I told myself to make the betrayal easier to swallow. My vision blurred. Tears dropped onto the page, smearing the ink, but I could still read his words. Tomorrow, when you show up at that church in a dress you probably saved for months to buy, I'm going to let them seat you in the back like you don't matter. I'm going to stand at that altar and pretend I don't see you. And when you try to talk to me, when you ask me why, I'm going to tell you not to embarrass me, Mom. I'm going to tell you not to embarrass me. Do you know what that makes me? Do you understand what kind of person says that to the woman who sacrificed everything so he could have something? It makes me exactly what the Carters were afraid I'd always be. Not good enough. Not because of where I came from, but because I was willing to deny it. Willing to deny you. I keep thinking about all those mornings you called me before work. The way your voice always sounded tired but happy. Like hearing from me was the best part of your day. I keep thinking about how you used to save the last bite of everything for me, even when I knew you were still hungry. How you worked yourself to exhaustion so I could have a life you never had. And my repayment for all that love is to exile you to the back of a church and pretend you're not my mother. The words broke off there, like he'd had to stop. The next paragraph started further down the page, the handwriting shakier. I tell myself, I'm protecting Emily, that her parents would make her life hell if I didn't comply, that she'd lose her inheritance, her family, everything, and maybe that's true. Maybe I am protecting her, but I'm also protecting myself from judgment, from pity, from the looks I'd get if people knew that my mother cleans toilets for a living, and that's the part I can't forgive myself for. Mom, that's the part that's making me sick, because you taught me that all honest work has dignity. You taught me that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account or their job title. You taught me that the size of someone's heart matters more than the size of their house. And I learned all those lessons. I believed them, right up until the moment it became inconvenient to believe them. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for tomorrow. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that what I'm doing isn't about you. It's about my weakness, my failure, my inability to be half the person you are. You are the best thing I'll ever have the honor of coming from. You are proof that love is real and sacrifice means something, and that one person's dedication can change an entire life. And tomorrow, I'm going to stand in front of God and everyone and say vows about love and commitment and choosing your partner through everything. Then I'm going to break the first vow I ever made, the one I made to myself when I was 8 years old, watching you come home from your second shift with your hands raw and your eyes exhausted. The vow that said I'd make everything you sacrificed worth it, that I'd make you proud. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to be both the son you deserve and the man Emily's family will accept. So I'm choosing, and I'm choosing wrong. And I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. I love you. I'll always love you, even when I'm too much of a coward to show it. Daniel. The letter slipped from my hands. I sat in my chair as darkness filled the apartment. As the streetlights flickered on outside, as the world kept turning while mine had stopped, he knew every terrible thing he'd done, every word that had cut me, every moment of rejection. He'd known exactly what it would cost. And he'd done it anyway. That should have made it worse, should have made the betrayal sharper, more unforgivable. But somehow, it didn't, because woven through every line of shame and regret was something else. The boy I'd raised, the one who understood what love looked like because I'd shown him, who knew the difference between right and wrong because I'd taught him, who was drowning in guilt because somewhere deep down, beneath the fear and the pressure and the desperate need to fit into a world that rejected him, he still had a conscience. He was broken, but broken things can be repaired. I read the letter 3 more times that night, memorizing the words, the loops of his handwriting, the places where his pen had pressed hard enough to indent the paper beneath, and somewhere between the 3rd and 4th reading, I made a decision. I was going to get my son back. I didn't call first, didn't text to warn them. I'd spent 25 years respecting boundaries, asking permission, making sure I wasn't imposing. That ended now. Thursday afternoon, I left work early. The first time in a decade I'd asked for time off. Mrs. Murphy took one look at my face and waved me away with her blessing. By 4 o'clock, I was standing outside Daniel and Emily's apartment building. the letter folded in my purse, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The doorman tried to stop me. "I need to be announced." "I'm his mother," I said, and kept walking. The elevator ride to the 8th floor felt like drowning, like being born, like every terrifying transition that changes you on a cellular level. The hallway was exactly as I remembered from all those weeks of leaving baskets, carpeted, soft-lit, smelling faintly of expensive candles. Their door, 8C. I could hear movement inside, voices, the ordinary sounds of people living a life. I knocked before I could change my mind. Footsteps, the sound of a lock turning. Then Emily opened the door, still in her work clothes, and her eyes went wide. "Margaret, I need to see him." She didn't ask why, didn't make excuses. She just stepped back and called over her shoulder, "Daniel, you should come here." I walked into their apartment for the first time. It was beautiful, hardwood floors, high ceilings, furniture that matched, everything clean and new and expensive. And there, lined up on the kitchen counter like soldiers, were my baskets, every single one. The flowers long dead, the food spoiled, but kept anyway. Preserved like artifacts of love they didn't know how to accept. "Mom!" I turned. Daniel stood in the doorway to what must have been the bedroom, frozen like he'd seen a ghost. He was in sweatpants and an old t-shirt from his college, and his hair was messy, and he looked so much like the boy I'd raised that something inside me cracked wide open. "Emily told me," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "She told me about your in-laws, about their conditions, about what they asked you to do." All the color drained from his face. "Mom, And I read your letter." I pulled it from my purse, held it up, the one you wrote but couldn't give me. He looked at Emily, betrayal and relief warring on his face. She lifted her chin. "She deserved to know the truth. We both know she deserved better than what we gave her." "I should go," Emily said quietly. "You two need—" "No," I stopped her. "You're part of this family. You stay." The word hung there. Family. Daniel was shaking. I could see it from across the room. His hands, his shoulders, the careful control he was trying to maintain fracturing with every breath. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Mom, I know. You don't understand. What I did, what I said to you, it was unforgivable." I took a step toward him. "Is that what you think? That what happened at your wedding was unforgivable?" He nodded, tears starting to stream down his face. "You're wrong." Another step. "Do you know why?" He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "Because the love of a mother doesn't end because of one mistake. It doesn't end because you were weak when you should have been strong. It doesn't end because you made a choice that hurt me." I was close enough to touch him now, close enough to see every detail of his breaking. "It doesn't end, Daniel. That's what makes it love. I don't deserve—" "Probably not." I reached up and cupped his face in my hands, the way I used to when he was small and scared. "But love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I choose you. I've always chosen you, even when you couldn't choose me back." He collapsed then, like a building falling in on itself. His knees buckled and I caught him, and we sank to the floor together, and he sobbed like he was exorcising demons. Great, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere deeper than his lungs. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." "I know, baby, I know." I was so scared. I was so afraid of losing Emily, of losing everything I'd worked for. And I thought I could have both. I thought I could keep you and have their approval. And I was stupid. I was so stupid. You were human. I rocked him like I used to when he had nightmares. You made a mistake, a big one that hurt more than you could have imagined. But human beings make mistakes. And the good ones, the brave ones, they learn from them. Emily knelt beside us, crying too, her hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I've told him we're done with my parents, that if they can't accept him as he is, accept all of him, including where he comes from, then we don't need them. But he's been so afraid to reach out to you, so convinced you'd never forgive him." "I forgive you," I said, looking into my son's eyes. "Daniel, I forgive you." "How?" he choked out. "After everything." "Because you're my son. Because I understand what it's like to be caught between impossible choices. Because I read your letter and I saw that you knew it was wrong, that it haunted you, that you've been punishing yourself in ways I never would. I brushed the tears from his cheeks. And because staying angry would mean losing you forever, and I didn't survive 25 years of sacrifice to lose you now, we stayed on that floor for a long time, the three of us tangled together, crying out all the poison the Carters had pumped into our family. Emily told me about her decision to cut ties with her parents, about the trust fund she was giving up, about the society friends who'd already stopped calling. Daniel told me about the sleepless nights, the guilt that ate at him, the way he'd pick up the phone 100 times a day to call me and couldn't make his fingers work. The baskets, he said finally, his voice hoarse. Every time I saw one, it killed me, because you kept loving me even when I gave you every reason not to. You kept showing up even when I pushed you away. That's what mothers do, I said simply. We show up, eventually. We moved to the couch. Emily made tea that no one drank, and slowly, haltingly, we began to talk about what came next. Sunday dinners, Daniel said. If you'll have us every Sunday, no matter what, I'd like that. And I want you to know. He took a shaky breath. I'm going to do better. I'm going to be the son you deserve, the man you raised me to be. You already are, I said. You just forgot for a little while. Before I left that night, Daniel showed me the rest of the apartment. The second bedroom they'd been planning to use as an office, but were now thinking might make a good nursery someday. The photos on the mantel, including one of the three of us from his college graduation, before any of this happened, when things were simple. Can we take a new one? He asked. Start over. So we did. Emily set up her phone, and we squeezed together on the couch, and she took picture after picture until we found one where we were all smiling. Real smiles, the kind that come from surviving something hard and finding your way back to each other. As I drove home that night, the city lights blurring past my windows, I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing I'd ever done. Stronger than working 2 jobs, stronger than raising a child alone, stronger than surviving my son's rejection. Because forgiveness meant choosing love over pain. It meant building bridges instead of walls. It meant believing that people could change, could grow, could become better than their worst moments, and somewhere in that choice, in that terrifying leap toward grace, we'd gotten something back that the Carters could never touch. Each other a year later, I stood in my kitchen on a Sunday morning, making enough food for an army. It had become our ritual, these Sunday dinners where Daniel and Emily would arrive around noon and stay until the stars came out. We'd cook together, laugh together, tell stories that got more embellished with each retelling. My small apartment, once so quiet it echoed, now filled with life every week. They brought their laundry sometimes. Emily would sit at my kitchen table working on her laptop while I folded their clothes, and we'd talk about her new job. She'd started at a nonprofit, something that mattered to her, not just looked good on a Christmas card. Daniel would fix things I didn't even know were broken, tightening screws and replacing light bulbs, finding small ways to take care of me the way I'd taken care of him. But today was different. Today, they'd called ahead. We have something to tell you, Emily had said, her voice bright with barely contained joy. I knew before they walked through the door, a mother knows. Emily was glowing in a way that had nothing to do with makeup, and Daniel couldn't stop touching her, his hand on her back, her shoulder, like he needed constant confirmation she was real. They barely made it through the door before the words tumbled out. We're pregnant, Emily said, and burst into tears, happy ones this time. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, thought about how I'd react, what I'd say, how I'd feel, but none of those imaginings came close to the reality of it, the pure, uncomplicated joy of knowing my son was going to be a father, that this family we'd rebuilt was going to grow. Oh, baby! I pulled them both into a hug. Oh, my beautiful babies! We spent the afternoon planning, nursery colors and name possibilities, and whether they'd find out the gender or be surprised. Emily told me about her morning sickness, and I told her about mine, and we laughed about how Daniel had been a nightmare pregnancy, who gave me heartburn so bad I slept sitting up. You were worth it, I said, squeezing his hand. Every single moment. The months that followed brought changes. Emily's parents tried to reach out once, sending a card about the baby with a check inside. Emily sent it back with a note. Our child will know their grandmother, the one who showed up, not the ones who put conditions on love. I went to every doctor's appointment they'd let me attend, held Emily's hand during the ultrasound where we learned she was carrying a boy, cried when they asked if I'd be in the delivery room. "If you want me there," I'd said, "we need you there." Daniel had replied, he needs to know his grandmother from the very beginning. The day Emily went into labor, I was at work when Daniel called, panic and excitement warring in his voice. I met them at the hospital still in my work uniform, smelling like cleaning chemicals. My hair a mess. I didn't care. Neither did they. 14 hours later, at 3:47 in the morning, the same time I used to start my shift at the laundromat, my grandson was born. They named him Thomas Daniel Wilson, when the nurses finally let me hold him. When they placed that tiny, perfect creature in my arms, I understood something I'd been too hurt to see before. Everything had led to this moment. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every tear I'd cried, they were all threads in a tapestry that had been forming long before I could see the pattern. Even the pain, even the wedding, even those terrible months of silence, all of it had brought us here, to this hospital room at dawn, with 3 generations breathing in sync. "Mom," Daniel said softly. I looked up to find him watching me with Thomas, his eyes red but clear. "I want him to know what you taught me, about real strength, about love that doesn't quit, about showing up even when it's hard. I want him to know where he comes from," Emily added. "Not the Martha's Vineyard version, the true version, the one where his grandmother worked 2 jobs so his father could have a better life, where love meant sacrifice, not just words." I looked down at Thomas, at his miniature fingers wrapped around mine, at the way he fit perfectly in the crook of my arm, like he'd been designed for that exact space. "I'll tell him," I promised. "I'll tell him everything." And I have. Now that Thomas is walking, talking, filling my apartment with toy trucks and sticky fingerprints, I tell him stories about his daddy as a little boy, about the sacrifices we make for the people we love, about how sometimes people make mistakes, big ones, but that's not the end of the story. If they're brave enough to try again, I tell him about the wedding. He's too young to understand. About the hurt and the healing. About how his parents chose love over pride. I tell him about his other grandparents, the ones he's never met, not because I'm bitter, but because he deserves to know his own history. "Your daddy and I went through something hard," I explain, when he's old enough to ask why some families are bigger than others. "But we found our way back to each other, and that's what family does. We lose each other sometimes, but we keep finding the way home." Last Sunday, Daniel arrived early to help me cook. We stood at my stove, the same one where I'd made him breakfast before school, where we'd celebrated birthdays on a budget, where we'd survived and thrived and built a life from nothing. "I need to tell you something," he said, stirring the pot of soup I'd started. I've been meaning to say this for a while, but the words kept getting stuck. "What is it, baby?" He turned off the burner, set down the spoon, and looked at me with eyes that had learned to be brave. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me, for coming to our apartment that day, for choosing forgiveness when you could have chosen anger. You saved our family, Mom. You saved me." I reached up and cupped his cheek, the way I had in his apartment that day, the way I'd done 1,000 times before. "You saved yourself," I told him. "I just reminded you who you were." Thomas toddled in then, holding a toy car and demanding snacks with the imperious authority of a 2-year-old. Daniel scooped him up, and I watched my son become a father before my eyes, patient, loving, present, giving his son what the Carters never taught him, that people matter more than appearances, that love is measured in time, spent not money earned, that the size of your heart is the only size that counts. Today, as I write this, Thomas is napping on my couch. Daniel and Emily are doing dishes in my kitchen, and the afternoon light is slanting through my windows in golden stripes. My apartment is still small, still filled with second-hand furniture, still in a neighborhood where the Carters would never dream of visiting, but it's full of laughter and love and the ordinary chaos of family, full of second chances and hard-won grace, full of proof that you can break something precious and still put it back together, even if the seams show. People ask me sometimes if I regret anything, if I wish I'd done things differently, worked less, saved more, pushed harder for Daniel to acknowledge me at his wedding. The answer is no, because every choice I made, every sacrifice I offered, every moment of pain I endured, they all led me here, to this life where my son calls me every morning again, where my daughter-in-law brings me flowers and calls me mom, where my grandson will grow up knowing that his grandmother's greatest gift wasn't money or status or a last name that opens doors. It was love, unconditional, relentless, forgiving love, the kind that survives rejection and rebuilds from ruins, the kind that shows up with baskets of cookies even when the door stays closed, the kind that chooses grace over grievance, reunion over resentment, the kind that proves, again and again, that the strongest things in this world aren't built from wealth or status or the approval of people who measure worth in dollars. They're built from sacrifice and forgiveness and showing up day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Thomas stirs on the couch, and I go to him, scooping him up before he fully wakes. He nestles against my shoulder, and I breathe in his baby smell, milk and innocence and infinite possibility. "Tell me a story, Grandma," he murmurs, half asleep, so I do. I tell him about a woman who worked 2 jobs and raised a son alone, about mistakes and forgiveness and finding your way back to each other, about how love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every single day. And in the kitchen, my son washes dishes beside his wife, and they're laughing about something, and the Sunday light turns everything golden. This is my legacy, not money or status or a seat in the front row. This, right here, love that endures, family that forgives, and the unbreakable truth that sometimes the people we almost lose become the ones we hold most dear.